Hello. So welcome to my channel. Today, I want us to talk about State House spiritual experiences. I want us to sit back and reflect as we hear the narrations of State House experiences, Kenyan State House and Nigerian State House. So we start with Kenya. The first Kenyan president, Jomo Kenyatta, is one who experienced spiritual experiences which are brought to the public knowledge. Maybe there are others who experienced it, other presidents, but it was never exposed. But Jomo Kenyatta's experience was exposed. He was the first Kenyan president, therefore he was the first occupant of the Kenyan State House. Now, the first Kenyan head of public service was called Duncan Ndegwa. Also, he was the first Kenyan governor of Central Bank, and he served the longest in that position, which means that he had access to the center of power for many years. So when he retired, years later, he wrote his memoirs, an autobiography titled Kenyatta Struggles, My Story. And here is a cover page here. And he wrote how Jomo Kenyatta never spent a night, he never slept at Nairobi State House, because Kenyatta was very superstitious. Ndegwa writes that the only time that Mzee Kenyatta tried to sleep there, he began hearing some voices, strange voices at night. Like, Ndegwa describes those voices as voices of ghosts or some frogs, spiritual frogs. That's how Ndegwa describes them in his book. So all these matters are in the public domain, so it's not new. So that was about 1 a.m. when Mzee Kenyatta heard those noises, and he woke up very fast because he was very superstitious, and he ordered his security team to drive him straight to his rural home, which is in Kiambu, Gatundu, 40 kilometers away from Nairobi. So after that, he never again spent night at State House. He always used to sleep at Gatundu, his rural home. Or sometimes he could sleep at the other State House like Nakuru State House, Mombasa State House, but he never spent time again. He never slept again at the Nairobi State House because of that spiritual experience. So these things are real. They're very real. Now we go to Nigeria State House, which is called Aso Villa or Aso Rock. And here we have another senior person called Dr. Reuben Abati, PhD. With him, he was media spokesman and former President Goodluck Jonathan of Nigeria. So even Abati he had access to the center of power in Nigeria. So even him, he narrated his spiritual experience when he was working at Nigerian State House. And his experience is a bit elaborate. He didn't write a book like Ndegwa, but with him he narrated it in a newspaper and even press conferences on TV. So these things are real. They're very real. They're very real. And you find that they can teach us some lessons. Because we find that the life we live today, many things are happening, and life is spiritual. Life is very spiritual. So Abati's narration is very detailed. Let's hear it. So Abati's narration goes like this. He said this is his personal testimony. I was given an apartment to live in inside the villa, that's the State House. It was furnished and equipped. But when my son Michael arrived, one of my brothers came with a pastor who was supposed to stay in the apartment. But the man refused, claiming that the villa was full of evil spirits and that there will soon be a fire accident in the apartment. He complained about too much human sacrifice around the villa and advised that my family must never sleep overnight inside the villa. I thought the man was talking nonsense and he wanted the luxury of hotel accommodation. But it turned out to be right. The day I hosted family friends in that apartment and they slept overnight, there was indeed a fire accident. The guests escaped and they were so thankful. Not long after, the president's physician, living 2 compounds away, had a fire accident in his home. He and his children would have died. He escaped with bruises. Around the villa, while I was there, someone always died, or their relatives died. I can confirm that every principal officer suffered one tragedy or the other. It was as if you required to sacrifice something to remain on duty inside that environment. Even some of the women became merchants of dildo because they had suffered a special kind of death in their homes. And many of the men complained about something that had died below their waist too. That means that they lost their sexual power. The ones who did not have such a misfortune had one ailment or the other, and they had to nurse, for example, cancer of the brain or prostate cancer. So the villa was a hospital full of agonizing patients. I recall the example of one particular man who was an asset to the Jonathan presidency, who practically ran away from the villa. He said he required to save his life. He was quite certain that if he continued to hang around, he would die. I can't talk about colleagues who lost daughters and sons, brothers and uncles, mothers and fathers, and the many obituaries that we issued. Even the president was bereaved many times. His wife was in and out of hospital and undergoing many surgeries. And after her husband lost the election and conceded, all her ailments vanished and the surgeries were no longer required. Even all our colleagues who used to work and complain about death of their sexual powers, when they stopped working there, they all recovered. But others are not so lucky. Some died. There were days when convoys ran into ditches and lives were lost. In Norway, our helicopter almost crashed into a mountain. That was the first time I saw the president panicking. The weather was all so hazy, and they just kept saying it will not be nice for the president of a country to die in a helicopter crash. The president went into a prayer mode. We survived. In Kenya once, we had a bad strike. The plane had to be recalled, and we were already airborne with the plane acting like it could crash. In 2015 campaign election, our aircraft refused to start on more than one occasion. The aircraft just went dead. On some other occasions, we were stoned and targeted for evil. I really don't envy the people working in the villa, the seat of Nigeria's presidency. For about 6 months, I couldn't even breathe properly. For another 2 months, I was on crutches. But I think I was far luckier than the ones who are either nursing terminal diseases or other worse fates. When presidents make mistakes, they are probably victims of a force higher than what we imagine. Every student of politics will admit that when people get there at the villa, they change and become something else. And they'll act like they're under a spell. So that's the end of that statement. It's long, but it's a testimony of Reuben Abati, his experience at Nigerian State House or Aso Villa, and it should make us think and know that things are always spiritual. So that's all for today. You can share and subscribe and leave your comments in the comment section.